Hi, I'm Jason Willoughby with Reach the City Ministries, and we're going to talk about a second very subtle issue that weighs down our spirits, that provokes irritability and anger within us, that is producing a lot of the gasoline fueling the fire of divisions, polarization, uh, this explosion of rage that we see going on in our nation, and most importantly, inside the church. I can understand if the world is going there, but what's going on with so many of us carrying this freight and then speaking and treating other people out of that place? Let's take a deeper look at a surprising issue, which is when we're heartbroken over not just people, individuals, but entire groups break our heart, and our heart is broken over them. What do we do with all this accumulated grief over groups that we care about? It's interesting, just as groups can harm us, just as groups can injure and oppress and commit injustice against us, on a positive note, we can care about whole groups of people. We don't just care about individuals in our families, we love our family. We don't just care about certain people in our church, we love our church. And when we have a group of people like a nation, a church, a family, a racial or ethnic group, a social group, when we have a whole group of people that we love and are a part of and want to see good happen to them, and they're in destruction and sorrow and pain, it breaks our hearts. But there's a problem, and the problem is this: we can't handle it. So here I am doing my daily prayer walk, reflecting with the Lord. I've gotten all those group injuries, those groups of people I blame out of my soul and onto Christ, and I'm feeling free. And then there's another layer of oppression that I'm feeling. Something's clogging my soul. And as I'm prayer walking, the Spirit of God reminds me that there's a deep issue of grief that I've been carrying without even knowing it. And that's grieving over people, over groups of people. I realized I was grieving for my country and what's become of it. My heart is broken over how we've ended up and where we're heading. I realized I was grieving the Church of Jesus Christ, what's become of us, where we're heading. I'm full of sorrow over the state of things, over what's happened to us. I'm looking at generations. I'm seeing generations of older folks who are being lost to populism, an idolatry of political power. I'm seeing younger adults, a generation following me, being lost to a secular progressivism, and many leaving the faith entirely. And my heart is broken. Problem was, it was actually having a deeply negative impact on my own heart and soul. The big question became, what do I do with not grieving for individuals, like when I lose someone to death, I'm sorry for that personal loss, but what do I do with the heartbreak I'm feeling for whole groups? And it's interesting, Paul in Romans 9 felt incredible sorrow for his people Israel and the rejection of the gospel. It was almost too much to bear. It was so deep, that sorrow he felt for his own nation, his own people. Or Jesus looking down the Mount of Olives on the triumphal entry, bursting into tears and lamenting over Jerusalem, over his home city, the capital of his people, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, who kills those sent to her. How often I wanted to gather together your chicks, as a hen gathers her chicks, but you wouldn't. And again, there's sorrow for the group that Jesus is feeling. We can go into the Old Testament and see all the prophets lamenting and grieving over their nation and over the generation they were a part of, and how they've gone wayward and are stubbornly wicked and facing God's judgment. So it is entirely possible, biblically, legitimately, to feel heartbreak over not just a personal loss, but over a loss and a sorrow we're feeling for a whole group of people. One of the hard things about this is we're not even aware we're doing it when we're doing it. We're carrying the sorrows of other people, other groups of people. And here's the question. Were we ever meant to carry the sorrows of the whole human race or large groups of people? Were we ever designed? Is that our role? Is that our job? And thankfully, in Isaiah 53, we are told of Messiah, the man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, who carried and bore our sorrows. Jesus is the one and only Messiah who bears not only the sin of the world, but the sorrow of sin of the world. He alone can handle the heartbreak and has handled it and has carried it. It's not my job to grieve over the human race and carry the sorrow of all humanity. It is not my job to carry an entire group, a whole nation's sorrow. It is not my job to carry even the sorrow for my whole family or my whole generation. I'm too small. I'm tiny. Thankfully, there's somebody who's already done it and done it perfectly. And that somebody is Jesus Christ. I don't have to do his job for him. So the solution here is much the same with carrying group grievances, group on person or group against group grievance. Now we're looking at personal sorrow over whole groups, and we make a list. Who are the groups I'm sorrowing over? And then emotionally and spiritually, I literally transfer ownership of the sorrow of that group, the sorrow over that group, to Jesus. I go group by group by group by group. Here's what's interesting. When I handed all that back to Christ, a huge space was opened up within me. I began to breathe again. I began to have much more space and capacity to focus on loving well other people. I was more engaged, more free, less oppressed and weighed down, more able to be the person in the moment Jesus wanted me to be. So if that's you, if you take an inventory and you realize I am heartbroken over this group and this other group, and you're carrying all that group sorrow, let me humbly ask you to join me in offloading that onto Christ, the man of sorrows, the one who bore our sorrows and carried our griefs on the cross. Let him have it back. Get out of the business of doing his job for him and be free. And then in that space, let him give you not sorrow, but joy and compassion and love for others. And instead of clogging up the drain with sorrow you cannot bear, we will be free to enter into the hurting, sorrowing other people without taking it over as our own, and instead bringing Christ's life and his love into that situation, into that group. So there's the answer, folks. I point you to Jesus Christ, the Messiah, who's done this job already. Rest in this, find peace in this, and be free.